Oh, that's a joke. Jody, we look to you as the anchor woman.
No.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's your turn.
Thank you. First, I really would like to thank everybody who made this happen. I can't name every name because I don't really know you people.
I'll try to name it. I'll
No,
try to
but
name a few at the very end.
Thank you. And all the volunteers, and it's really takes a lot of work to do this. I used to have to do it in the landmine campaign, so I feel your pain and appreciate that you've done it, because I think this has been remarkable. Second of all, I want to give a shout out to Denise and her friends at Christ the King School. They kidnapped me this morning and would not let me go until I promised, and they made me write it on my hand. I also want to give a shout out to the city of Newark. Over the years of working for peace, many of us have been in many different locations at conferences and meetings and things like that. And this is one of the most warm, open, sharing, inspiring summits, meetings, groups that I've been to. I've really, really appreciated that there's been a huge effort to include Newark up here. If we're talking about community, then in the community where we are sitting, there should be representatives of that community instead of us illustrious ones pontificating from the platform. It gets really tiring to be illustrious and pontificating. It really does. It's exhausting. It's the downside of the Nobel Prize. I want to talk just for a second, though, about the mechanics of global organizing. When Lema spoke earlier and said it isn't rocket science, and I said that I would take a few minutes at the end to just talk about it, I want to do that. Because sometimes I think people think it is rocket science, or there's some special skill to being an international organizer. And there is no special skill. There's a commitment to the we. I think one of the harder things in this country probably to get, since it is so individualistic, and it's not our fault, we were trained that way, but to give up that ego, that self, that individual recognition for the we can be very difficult. We were fortunate in the landmine campaign that we were the we, and the campaign still continues. The campaign is the we. We had no executive director. We had no central office. In fact, some of us beat down the concept of a central office. We would allow no secretariat in Europe. They like secretariat, we like office. There were neither. Because we wanted each and every individual who wanted to be part of this effort to get rid of landmines. You can put anything in the blank. What we did with landmines can be done with nuclear weapons. It can be done with the killer robots that are now being developed. It can be done with HIV/AIDS. It can be done with anything. I truly believe that. But it is about the we with a goal and working for that goal. So when organizations and individuals joined our call to ban landmines, that's all they had to do. They had to agree to 3 points. And then they had to give what they could give. That's all. There is no money requirement. There was no, if you don't do this on Sunday, you're not part, nothing, nothing. We would sit down and develop a strategy that most of us felt would work. And then we would share it with everybody in the network, and it was in 80 countries around the world. So everybody got the same information. And then each and every campaign, each and every NGO that was part of it could contribute to the best of their ability. Some could only write a paragraph a month in their monthly newsletter giving an update on the progress. But that informed X number of people in their network about the progress and gave those people who were reading it information about how they could possibly participate. Some, like Human Rights Watch, had 3 full-time still do, 3 full-time staff committed to the work of the international campaign to ban landmines. Some in France who were Handicap International, who worked on the landmine survivor side, the same, had a huge number of people working on it. A mines advisory group that took the mines out of the ground, same thing. And it was also, as you can just see from that limited, it was cross-sectoral. We had organizations that worked on the legal aspect of banning landmines. We had organizations that were political, social political campaigners like myself. We had people who helped the victims. We had people taking the mines out of the ground. We knew more than anybody else on the planet about all aspects of landmines. And when we would be at an event and people had to comment on different aspects, no one person stood up and pontificated and knew for everybody. If governments who we were trying to get to negotiate the treaty wanted to know about landmine survivors, the people who got up and talked about it were the survivors, right? They're the people who live with this. They're the people who wanted to become advocates for survivors and for other people living in minefields so that they would not have to. So they would speak. If it was about mine clearance, the mine clearers would speak. If they needed a person like me, I would speak. Meaning, I would be blunt in their face. And I once grabbed a U.S. colonel by the throat and used the F-bomb. My now husband was standing beside me at the time, and he said, "No, Colonel, what she meant to say." My husband, you see, used to work on the Hill, and I said, "No, what I meant to say was, fuck you, we do not agree." The point being that you let everybody bring their strength and weakness to your effort. We didn't have assigned leadership. We had leaders who became leaders by virtue of the work they did. Anybody in our campaign could and can be a leader. All they had to do was say, "I want to do this to help the campaign move forward," and you just watch. If they did it, awesome. If they didn't do it, you ignored them. Seriously. I don't care what you say to me. I've said this every time I've spoken. Talk is not a strategy for change.
Preach it.
Mm-hmm. Hope is not a strategy for change. Voting once every 4 years is not a strategy for change. It is like-minded people working together and putting their own ego somewhere else in common cause to make a difference. And I'll tell you, when we started the landmine effort, I told some of you the other day, there were 2 NGOs and me. And, clearly we're thinking, this may go nowhere. My only thought was, if we can do anything that helps people living with landmines in countries in the world, wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that alone be awesome? If we could then use the very graphic image of what a landmine is, designed to mutilate a human being, and that unfortunately that landmine stays in the ground for up to 100 years. If we can get people to get that and then use it as a prism to help people understand all of the impact of war, that it's not just the landmine, it's not just the landmine survivor, it's whole communities ruined, but it's years of development set back. If we could do that, how awesome. If we could remind the militaries of the world that there are some laws about which kinds of weapons you can develop and use, how awesome. They didn't like that part, I have to say. Didn't like it at all. But it was about, if we could do any of that or any combination thereof, that alone would be awesome. And we were doing it because it was the right thing to do. When nobody else was looking, when nobody else had thought about landmines. So what? But by having that common goal, by letting everybody participate to the best of their ability, by shaming no one, if all I can do is this, it's like, awesome, awesome, thank you for doing that. And by making sure that every single NGO in the coalition of independent NGOs had the same information about what was happening. And the purpose of that was severalfold, one being, if one individual or a small cabal keeps all of the information, then they got all the power. If you truly want to bring about change with people and organizations that you share a belief with, you have to ensure that each and every single one of them has the same information so you can move forward as a movement for change. The ones who complain, let them complain. The ones who complain, we had several cases where people would say, that tactic sucks. And I would say, well, what do you think is better? And they would posit something, and I would say, awesome, do it. I am not lying. Not one of them who complained and offered a different alternative ever did it. It seemed their job was to complain and then sit back and let other people do the work. So what? Let them do it. You know? It's about finding a way to move it all forward. And that's why when I have said that I hope you know, I've heard so many of you say, oh, thank you, I'm inspired. That's awesome. Inspiration is a good starting point, but inspiration without action, worthless. Truly. So you had a nice weekend listening to a bunch of people say interesting things. That's not going to change the world. It is not a strategy for change. And you are not going to do it by yourself. I didn't do the landmine campaign by myself. And when people introduce me as an example of an individual who changed the world, I want to throw up. I am an example of an individual who worked with thousands of people around the world who had the same vision for a different future. I'm an example of a human being who feels power by working with, not being the. I feel like a member of, I feel so connected to the planet because we have people, you know, in 80 countries, and I've been to almost every one of them. And when I walk the planet, I feel like I carry them all somewhere in me. And I know we did that for almost every, you know, NGO in our campaign. They were part, you know, some of them in countries that were emerging democracies after the fall of the Soviet Union and didn't know how to organize themselves out of a paper bag. We trained them. We trained them. We gave them, you know, workshops in writing a press release, workshops in lobbying. We'd take them with us when we had to go talk. I never was allowed to go. We would take them with them. The ones who were good at lobbying went to do the lobbying, and they would take the new ones who'd never done it at all with them and help them learn how to feel comfortable explaining to a government representative that it was their job to do what the people of the world was asking them to do. You know, it's not strange. You were hired by us to do stuff. Get off your butt and do it. We also allowed phenomenal creativity. And like, I couldn't make up a slogan to save my soul. But we had women from the former Soviet states who would come up with different slogans every day. And she'd stand, there was one in particular, would stand outside the door of the conference room and give it to each and every government representative as he came in the room. 99.9% were men. As he came in, and then all they'd hear all day was that slogan. And then we were able somehow to get the United Nations to let us put a ticker counting, because every 20 minutes somewhere in the world while these men in suits were sitting in Geneva looking at the beautiful lake in Mont Blanc, feeling that if they changed a comma in a paragraph of legal language, they had accomplished one hell of a lot. As they were trying to change the commas, we had a count going of how many new landmine victims were happening in the 2.5 years they did nothing. We also got them to let us make an explosion every 20 minutes. So they're sitting there trying to negotiate and they get freaked out, you know. We often said if we could take the entire body and put them in a minefield in Cambodia, like the women of Liberia when they sat outside the doors and weren't going to let those men out until they negotiated something worth negotiating. If we could put them in a minefield, that would clarify their thinking. We couldn't do that, so we did all these other things to bring the minefield to them. We put a fake minefield in front of the door with sensors, and it looked like a minefield. And you walk, and sometimes you get blown up, and I walked on it, freaked me out. And it got so that some of them found a sneaky way to go in around the back so they didn't have... But just all of this to say that everybody can contribute in a different way. You know, we had a guy in Thailand who owned the biggest shopping mall in Thailand, and there was a big meeting there, and he came out and offered to have landmine survivors' pictures hung throughout the entire mall. There was an orchestra in Canada that recorded the Verdi Requiem. And they sold it, and every single penny, $178,000, went for mine victims. Meaning you don't have to stop being you. No matter what your job is, you can find a way to work with others is also key. That's why I say to you, go volunteer somewhere. Work with others. Feel the strength of community for change. And get over the thought that any one person can change the world. I close with also what I said the other day, and the nuclear people probably know way better than me. Something like 70% of the people of the planet don't want nuclear weapons. What percent of that 70% gets up off their butt and organizes together to make that happen? If 70% of the people of the planet actually got into groups, so they'd be pressuring their country and you'd be pressuring your country and the campaign overall would be pressuring, you could get rid of those damn things in 5 years like we did landmines. I'm sorry, it's not magic. If governments don't think you care, they do nothing. And if you don't say a word, they don't care if you care or not because you are giving them your power. Each and every one of us has power. Each and every one of us has a responsibility to choose how to use that power. If your choice about your power is to do nothing, that's your choice, that's cool. Except what you are doing is giving the structure in place your silent acceptance. So I hope, even if a handful of you are really inspired enough to go and do something new you've never done before, rock on. I applaud you. Oh, wait, I want to say one thing. Just one on. In turn, being free disclosure, I am not a Tea Partyist. I am not a Democrat, I am not a Republican. There is no party in the United States of America that expresses my wants, dreams, desires, and needs. I want to see emerging new parties that do that. Our country's been controlled by 2 political parties since it began. We need a rebellion, not just in Newark back in the 60s. We need a rebellion in America to reclaim real democracy. I want to be part of that one. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have a, well, we're almost at the end of the time.
Comment?
Thank you, Jody. Shirin, do you want to say anything, last word? We have just a couple minutes. Would you like to say a last word? I think so, good.
من هم از حوصله شما که تا امروز تا این ساعت با ما بودید میخوام تشکر کنم و به دنبال حرفای جودی یک چیزی رو بعد اضافه کنم.
Besides thanking you for having listened to us, I want to add to what Jody said.
دموکراسی یک مفهوم ایدئالیست و سلسله مراتب داره.
I want to say that democracy is an ideology and it has their levels to it.
آمریکا طبیعتاً با توجه به اینکه شما آزادی عمل دارید و می توانید به کاندیداها رأی بدید، از این جهت خب طبیعتاً میشه گفت دموکراسیه.
If we look at America with regard to the fact that there's freedom in elections and you can choose whomever you want, there is democracy.
همچنین ایجاد احزاب جدید در قانون ممنوع نیست، بنابراین احزاب جدید هم میتونن ایجاد بشن و میشه گفتش که خب از این جهت هم اشکالی نیست. خب هر کس میخواد حزبی رو درست کنه و یه عده‌ای رو ثبت نام میکنن میرن تو اون حزب.
Also, so far as creating a new party is concerned, there is no prohibition in the laws of this country. So anyone can go and come up with an idea and found a party and register people.
اما این ظاهر قضیه است.
But this is the surface.
مسئله مهم این است که مخارجی که برای انتخابات خرج میشه اینا از کجا میاد؟
What counts is the money spent on elections. Where does that come from?
اگر شما هزینه‌های هنگفتی که برای انتخابات صرف میشه، اون در حقیقت باعث میشه که دموکراسی در این کشور صدمه بخوره.
The enormous money that's spent on elections actually damages democracy in this country.
اگر قانوناً هزینه کردن برای انتخابات رو ممنوع بکنید، اون وقت می‌بینید که رقابت سالم بین همه احزاب و همه مردم به وجود میاد.
If we prohibit spending on elections, then we will see that a healthy competition will take over in elections in this country.
باید کاری بکنید که مردم به جای سرمایه بخوان رای بدن. سرمایه ها تعیین کننده آرا نباشن.
You have to take steps that money does not vote for you.
مسئله بسیار مهم در دموکراسی، مسئله بسیار مهم در انتخابات و در دموکراسی این است که افکار عمومی چطوری ساخته و هدایت میشه.
One thing that's very important in elections in a democracy is to how public opinion is built.
در آمریکا قانون خوبی هست که آنتی تراسته، اما من تعجب میکنم چرا این رو در مورد مدیا استفاده نمیکنن.
For example, there's a good law, the antitrust law, but I don't understand why they don't use it for media.
20 سال قبل الان تمام مدیا چه تلویزیون، رادیو، روزنامه متعلق به 6 کورپوریشن بزرگه که اینا تازه تو همدیگر هم سهام دارن.
If you look at the media, the major media in this country, be it television, radio, or newspapers, they belong to 6 big corporations, and the stockholders in these corporations are sometimes the same people.
و در حقیقت تعدادی معدود هستن که بر مدیا حکومت میکنن و افکار عمومی رو به هر شیوه که دلشون بخواد شکل میدن.
This means that a few people actually govern the media and they can form public opinion as they like.
البته مدیای مستقل هم هست که اینا هم فعالیت میکنن ولی که قدرت رقابت با این کورپوریشن های بزرگ رسانه‌ای رو ندارن.
Of course, I know that there exist independent media who are active too, but they don't have the power of competition between them and the larger media.
بنابراین اگر میخواهید دموکراسی در کشورتون ترقی پیدا کنه، یکی قانون آنتی تراست رو در مورد مدیا باید به کار ببرید و دیگر اینکه هزینه کردن برای انتخابات ممنوع بشه.
Therefore, if you want the advancement of democracy in your country, first, the antitrust law should be used for the media, and second, money should come out of elections.
اون وقت می‌بینید هم آمریکایی بهتری خواهید داشت و همین که دنیای بهتری، برای اینکه گفتم اگر سیاست‌های آمریکا درست باشه دنیا به سمت سوی بهتری میره.
Then you can have a better America, and as I said earlier, a better world, because if things change in America, the world can change for the better.
و با امید اون روز.
And I hope that we get to that day.